My name is Hannah, and when I was 5 years old, my life changed a lot. That was when my sister, Julia, came into the world, and from then on, I felt like I didn't matter in my own house. My first memories are of Julia singing. When she turned 3, everyone looked at her during family gatherings. I was in the back, holding plates of snacks that I helped Mom make. Julia had a lovely voice, so sweet that it made everyone pause to listen. My parents, Jack and Audrey, really believed she would be the next Mariah Carey. Hannah, please help your sister with her scales, Mom would say, not looking up from her phone as she recorded another video of Julia performing. And be sure to do the dishes first, she'd say. When I was 8 years old, Julia was 4 years old. As she twirled in her pink tutu in the living room, I was figuring out the washing machine since Mom was busy with Julia's singing lessons. One Thursday morning when I was 14, I asked, "Why can't I go to Rebecca's birthday party?" Mom sighed and said, "Because Julia has a show at the community center, and we need you to help with her costume changes." "But I made a promise to Rebecca," I said, trying to explain. "Hannah, don't be selfish," Dad said. "Your sister needs your help. She is really talented." He didn't complete the sentence, but I understood what he was saying. Not like me. Then the day came when everything changed. Julia was 12 years old and I was 16 years old. She and her friends went to the mall by themselves, which I was never allowed to do when I was her age. They stayed a long time at the ice cream shop, eating one sundae after another, trying to see who could eat the most. The next morning, Julia got up with a sore throat. It got bad fast and became a serious case of strep throat. The infection hurt her vocal cords, and the doctor said she might not be able to sing like before. I was in the kitchen working on my homework when they returned from the hospital. "You did this." Mom shouted at me, "You're the big sister. You should have been looking at her." "But I was doing the laundry and cleaning the bathroom, just like you asked me to," I said, trying to explain. "Don't make excuses." Dad yelled and hit the table with his hand. "You can't go out for a month. No phone, no TV, nothing at all. Perhaps this will help you learn to be responsible." That night, while I was in bed looking at the ceiling, I promised myself something. One day, I want to create a life where I can stand on my own. I only needed to get through a few more years in this house, where I felt like just a helper and someone to blame. The next 4 years went by quickly, filled with tasks, blame, and unspoken anger. Whenever Julia got into trouble, like sneaking out, skipping classes, or using Mom's credit card without asking, it always seemed to be my fault in some way. When I got my acceptance letter to State College, I put it on the kitchen table during dinner, right next to Mom's meatloaf. I picked that moment on purpose, so they had to talk. "It's the cheapest choice," I said, trying to sound calm. "The tuition is fair." "We don't have the money, Hannah," Dad said, not even looking up from his plate. Julia smiled from her seat. "Perhaps you could have focused on developing real skills instead of just doing chores all day." "You could take out a loan for me," I said, ignoring her comment. "I'll pay back every penny after I graduate and get a job. I promise. Please, this is important to me." Mom sighed, that long, tired sigh I'd heard 1,000 times before. "Honey, we're not taking out any loans. College isn't for everyone. Why don't you look for a job at the mall or maybe that new cafe downtown?" "But I got a scholarship," I said, my voice breaking. "It covers part of the tuition. I just need help with the rest. I've researched everything and made a budget." "Enough," Dad snapped, dropping his fork onto his plate with a loud clatter. "We said no loans. End of discussion. Some people are meant for college and some aren't. Accept it and move on." I stared at my untouched dinner, tears blurring my vision as I fought to keep them from falling. I saw Julia smirking, enjoying the drama like always. That night I called my best friend Jenna. We've been close since middle school, bonding over our love of math and being outsiders. Me because of my family, and her because her Italian immigrant parents own the Golden Dragon restaurant downtown. They won't help, I sobbed into the phone. They won't even think about taking out a loan. All these years of straight A's, doing everything right, and they don't even care. Jenna was quiet for a moment before saying, "Come over tomorrow. My parents want to talk to you." The next evening, I sat in the office of the Golden Dragon with Jenna and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ken, after the restaurant had closed. They had known me for years. I had spent countless afternoons there doing homework, escaping the chaos at home. "We've watched you grow up, Hannah," Mrs. Ken said kindly. "You're like a second daughter to us." Jenna must have told them everything. Mr. Ken nodded and said, "We will pay your tuition." I started to object, but he held up his hand. "You will work here part-time after your classes. Good wages, flexible schedule. Pay us back slowly, no interest. This is an investment in your future." A few weeks later, I moved into my dorm at State College. My parents barely noticed when I packed my things. They were too busy planning Julia's big piano recital, their latest attempt to find her a new talent to replace her singing. I started classes during the day and worked evenings at the Golden Dragon, learning everything from waiting tables to managing inventory. One random Sunday during my sophomore year, I got a call from my mom. I was in the library studying when her number popped up on my screen. For a moment, I just stared at it, my heart racing. We hadn't spoken in months. "Hey, sweetie," she said, sounding distracted. There was noise in the background, probably Julia practicing something new. "Just checking in. What have you been up to?" "I'm in college," I replied, waiting for her to ask how I was managing without their help or paying for school. "Oh, that's nice," she said vaguely. "Julia's getting straight A's in her advanced classes. We're so proud of her. She's really thriving since, the voice thing." She didn't ask any questions about me, how I was doing, how I was paying for school. Nothing. And I didn't offer any details. The call ended as quickly as it began, with Mom hanging up. That was how my college years went, quietly building my own life while they stayed focused on Julia. I only went home for big holidays, and every visit felt the same. Relatives crowded around the dining table, laughing and chatting, while Julia soaked up all the attention. My parents looked so proud, as always. I'd help in the kitchen, listening to everyone in the other room talk about Julia's latest accomplishments. But Thanksgiving during my junior year was different. I was setting out the sweet potato casserole when Aunt Sydney started asking about Julia's college plans. Mom proudly said, "We've been saving for years. Our little star's education fund is all set. We've put aside enough for her to go anywhere she wants." I almost dropped the casserole. The dish burned my hands through the oven mitts, but it didn't hurt as much as hearing the truth. 3 years ago, they told me they couldn't afford to help me with college. Now I knew they had money all along, just not for me. That night, I sat in my old bedroom, wrapped in my childhood blanket, and called Jenna. They had the money, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. They just didn't think I was worth it. "Then prove them wrong," Jenna said firmly. "You already are." She was right. From that moment, I focused on my studies and my job at the Golden Dragon. By the time I graduated, I had not only paid back every cent I owed the Kens, but I had also learned everything about running a successful business. I worked my way up from waitress to shift supervisor and eventually to assistant manager, all while keeping a 4.5 GPA. On my last day at the restaurant, Mr. Ken called me into his office. "I have a friend at Morgan and Chase Corporate," he said, sliding a business card across the desk. "They need someone smart and hardworking, someone like you." I told him about how you improved our inventory system and increased efficiency by 40%. He's very interested. A week after graduation, I walked into my new office at Morgan and Chase, wearing a suit I bought with my own money. My desk had a nameplate that read, Caroline Mitchell, Junior Analyst. Within 7 months, I was leading my own team. By the end of my first year, I'd been promoted twice and was managing projects that senior leaders noticed. When Christmas came around again, something felt off as I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house was dark, except for a light in the living room window. There were no cars on the street, and the usual holiday decorations were missing. Mom answered the door in an old sweater instead of her usual festive outfit. "Julia is not coming," she said quietly. I stepped into the unusually quiet house, feeling something was off right away. The familiar smell of Mom's Christmas roast was missing. "Where's Julia?" I asked. "She's celebrating with friends," Mom said, wringing her hands. Their family rented a cabin in the mountains, very exclusive. I glanced at the dining room table, which was usually overflowing with Mom's holiday feast. Now it held only a store-bought ham and some microwave sides. The house was silent. No relatives, no Christmas music. Dad sat slumped in his armchair, looking older and more tired than I remembered. "We've had some setbacks," Mom finally admitted in a soft voice, glancing at Dad, who gave a slight nod. "The investment your father made didn't work out. We had to take out loans to cover the losses. A big family Christmas just wasn't in the budget this year." I looked at them as they picked at their small meal. These were the same people who once seemed so powerful, controlling every part of my life. Now they looked small, defeated. Despite everything, something stirred inside me, sympathy, maybe, or just old habits. "Give me a minute," I said, pulling out my phone. I scrolled through delivery options, grateful for restaurants that stayed open on Christmas. 30 minutes, I said, placing the order. Several $100s later, I'd ordered a proper feast: prime rib, glazed ham, truffle mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, and 3 kinds of pie. When the food arrived, the rich smells filled the house, and we sat down to eat. I noticed Mom eyeing my designer watch and the silk blouse I was wearing, both of which cost more than their monthly utility bills. "We've been thinking," Mom began carefully, sharing a look with Dad. "Since you're doing so well now, maybe you could help us out, just temporarily, until we get back on our feet." I studied them over the rim of my wine glass. Part of me wanted to remind them of what they'd said when I begged for help with college. Some people are meant for college and some aren't. But looking at their tired faces, I couldn't bring myself to say it. "I could set up an additional card on my account," I said slowly, "with a monthly limit." Mom's eyes lit up. "Oh, sweetheart, that would be $2,000 a month," I said firmly. "No more." They nodded eagerly. It was more than they had expected, even though it was less than a week's pay for me now. A few days later, I had the card issued and sent to Mom. They promised to use it responsibly, only for necessities. For the next few months, they kept their word. The charges were reasonable: groceries, utilities, basic needs. For once, things seemed to be on track. I barely noticed the money leaving my account. Sometimes, while checking my statements, I'd see charges from the same grocery store where I had worked one summer in high school, trying to save for college. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years passed, and I naively thought things were improving. The monthly allowance had created a rhythm in our relationship. Mom would call to discuss their expenses, and those talks gradually turned into real conversations, or at least I thought they did. Even Julia and I started talking again, though her competitive streak hadn't changed. Whenever I shared a work accomplishment, her smile would tighten, and her eyes would narrow slightly, just like when we were kids. "Senior project manager. That's nice," she'd say with that same dismissive tone she used when I achieved something in high school. I'm actually up for a promotion at Wilson and Company. It's a smaller firm, but very exclusive. Not everyone can handle the pressure. Their Mom and Dad couldn't stop raving about Julia's new boyfriend, Francis. He comes from such good stock. Mom would gush during our monthly calls. His parents own that real estate company downtown. For a while, the charges on Mom's cards stayed reasonable. Groceries, utilities, the occasional dinner out. Normal things, expected things. I even started to feel good about helping them, like maybe this financial support was mending our broken relationship. Then everything fell apart when I saw an Instagram post. Paradise with my L's ring. Engaged. Palm Tree, Florida. Julia's caption read, "The photo showed her and Francis on a beautiful beach, our parents standing beside them, all smiles. Francis's mother wore a designer sundress, and his father stood proudly next to his son with a hand on his shoulder." My finger froze mid-scroll. When had this happened? Why hadn't they told me? The next post made my stomach drop. So grateful to Mom and Dad for making this magical engagement trip possible for everyone to enjoy. They insisted on treating both families to this dream vacation. Best parents ever, sponsored by love. My brain clicked into overdrive, heart pounding. I opened my banking app with trembling hands. There it was, charges far beyond the monthly limit I had set. 7 first-class round-trip tickets to Florida Keys, $15,400. Grand Wa Resort, 3 ocean view suites for 7 nights, $20,600. Welcome dinner at Moroto, $3,200. Couple spa treatments, $2,300. Sunset sailing excursion, $2,500. Private beachfront dinner arrangement, $4,200. They had used my money to fund their secret family vacation. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. They had thrown an extravagant engagement party for Julia and her future in-laws, a celebration I wasn't even invited to, all while using my money to pay for it. My hands shook so badly that it took me 3 tries to dial Mom's number. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, 4. "Hello." Mom's voice was casual and light. In the background, I could hear Florida music, the sound of waves, clinking glasses, and laughter. Julia's distinct giggle stood out. "Where are you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and steady, the same tone I used in tense work meetings. "Oh, honey," Mom hesitated. The music grew quieter, like she was walking away from the party. "Your father and I just needed a little break, you know. Things have been so hard lately." A little break. I opened my banking app again, staring at the transactions. My free hand balled into a fist at the Grand Wa Resort with Julia, Francis, and his entire family. That kind of break costs over $55,000. Mom's silence, then muffled voices. I could hear her covering the phone, but fragments of the conversation slipped through. "She knows. What should I? Julia, maybe you should." I took a deep breath, my grip tightening on the phone. "Mom, why did you use my card to pay for everyone's trip? And why wasn't I invited to my own sister's engagement party?" More muffled voices, followed by the sound of the phone changing hands. When the new voice came on, it was Julia. Her words were sharp, dripping with contempt. "Listen, Miss Executive," she sneered. "You're not needed here. You're nothing more than a walking ATM. We don't want you here ruining everything with your little success story. Nobody cares about your precious career while we're celebrating my engagement." Her words hit like a punch, but I kept my composure. "That ATM just paid $25,000 for your party, another $25,000 for flights and extras. That's my money funding your perfect family moment. Julia let out a cold, harsh laugh. Well, that's what you're good for, isn't it? You keep working your fancy job and we'll keep spending your money. It's the only thing you're useful for anyway. You always were, even when we were kids. At least now you're finally serving a purpose. The line went dead. I called back immediately. First Mom, straight to voicemail. Then Dad, same result. I tried Julia's number, and it rang once before going to voicemail. She had declined the call. Within minutes, notifications flooded my phone one by one. My family members blocked me on every social media platform. Mom and Dad's profiles vanished first, followed by Julia's. Then a single text came through from Mom before she blocked my number. We're all tired of your attitude and jealousy. Just leave us alone. You've ruined enough special moments for Julia. I stared at the message, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. My hands were steady now as I opened the banking app. This time, I went straight to the travel reservation section. Each click felt like breaking a chain that had kept me tied to their toxic behavior for far too long. Hotel reservations for 3 luxury ocean view suites, canceled. Couples massage packages and sunset sailing excursions, canceled. Private beachfront dinner arrangements, canceled. First-class return flight tickets for 7, canceled. Mom's card was permanently deactivated. I put my phone down and waited, imagining their reactions. The hotel informing them their rooms weren't paid for. Their embarrassment when they tried to charge something to the room and were declined. The panic when they realized their return flights didn't exist anymore. Hours later, my phone lit up like fireworks. Call after call, message after message. Mom, Dad, Julia, and unfamiliar numbers with Florida area codes, probably the Thomases. The texts came flooding in. Mom, Hannah, please call us immediately. This is an emergency. Dad, fix this right now. Young lady, you're embarrassing the whole family. Julia, you better make this right or I swear to God. As the hours passed, the tone of the messages changed. Mom, sweetie, please, we can talk about this. Dad, we'll pay you back. Just help us out here. Julia, come on, Hannah. It's my engagement. Don't be so petty. Francis, my parents are furious. You need to reinstate those reservations. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I left their messages unread and methodically blocked every number and account they used to reach me, but not before taking screenshots of everything, proof of who they really were. I had a feeling those screenshots would come in handy. Around midnight, a notification popped up. Julia Mitchell had posted a new status. Her post read, I can't believe my own sister would try to ruin the happiest moment of my life. She's always been jealous of my happiness, but this is a new low, canceling our family's entire vacation out of spite. Who does that to their own sister's engagement celebration? Some people just can't stand to see others happy. #ToxicFamily, #BrokenHeart. The comments rolled in instantly. Oh my God, that's horrible. What kind of sister does that? I always knew there was something off about her. She's just jealous because you're getting married first. Your poor parents must be so embarrassed. I'd stayed quiet long enough. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I typed my response. Let me share what actually happened. My parents were using my credit card for basic expenses, limited to $2,000 a month. Yesterday, I found out they spent over $55,000 of my money to fund a luxury Florida vacation for Julia's engagement. They didn't ask me, they didn't tell me, and they didn't invite me. When I called to ask why, Julia told me I wasn't family, just a walking ATM. My mom's final message to me before blocking my number was, "We're all tired of you." So yes, I canceled the reservations I never authorized. I canceled the return flights I never agreed to pay for. I stopped funding the vacation I wasn't welcome at. Here are the screenshots of every message. Here are the credit card statements. This is the truth about your poor Julia and her ruined engagement party. Judge for yourselves who the toxic ones really are. Then I attached every screenshot and proof I had. The tide turned immediately. The comments shifted from anger at me to outrage at Julia. "Oh my God, Julia, how could you? Using your sister's money while excluding her. That's cruel. Your family planned a vacation and didn't even invite her. That's messed up. Hannah, you did the right thing. Stay strong." Those poor Thomases caught up in this family drama. The fallout was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. Through mutual friends and social media, I pieced together what happened next. I'd caused chaos in Florida. My parents had to borrow money from 4 different friends just to afford economy flights home. They were forced to check out of the Grand Wa Resort in front of all the other guests. Julia, as expected, threw a massive tantrum in the lobby, and someone caught the whole scene on TikTok. The real explosion came when the Thomases realized they'd have to pay for their own accommodations. They'd been promised a fully paid luxury vacation, only to find out they'd been dragged into my family's lies. "We trusted you," Mrs. Thomas reportedly yelled at my mom by the pool. "You said you were taking care of everything. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" Julia, true to herself, made things worse. "Oh, stop being such greedy beggars," she shouted back. "If you can't afford a few nights in Florida, maybe your son isn't good enough for our family after all." Francis stood there in stunned silence before finally speaking. "You're right about one thing," he said quietly. "Someone isn't good enough for someone's family." Then he pulled the engagement ring off Julia's finger and walked away with his parents. Just like that, the engagement was over. Julia's dream wedding was canceled before it even began, all because they couldn't resist stealing from me one last time. A week after they returned home, the knocking started. "Hannah, honey, please open the door." Mom's voice trembled from the other side of my apartment door. "We need to talk. We know we messed up. Just give us a chance to explain." Dad added, "Please just listen." I sat on my couch, not moving, barely breathing. The TV was muted, its blue light flickering across my face as they continued to plead. The knocking went on for 20 minutes before they finally gave up. Later, I found out they tried to convince my building manager to let them in, claiming it was an emergency. He called to check with me, and I told him not to let them up again. That night, Jenna came over with takeout from Golden Dragon. We sat on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Your post got shared in some family trauma support groups," she said, picking at her noodles. "A lot of people are calling you a hero for standing up to toxic family members and setting boundaries." I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn my family's love and prove my worth. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval to feel whole. I finally realized I was worth something, not because of all the money I'd given them, hoping they'd see me as family instead of just someone to use. "You know what's funny?" I said, watching a plane disappear into the night sky. "For the first time in my life, I don't care what they think of me. I don't care if they're sorry. I don't care if they change. I'm just done." Sometimes the hardest part of growing up isn't learning to stand on your own. It's knowing when to walk away. I'd spent my whole life in Julia's shadow. Now it was time for me to step into the light.